right, welcome to tech session number 13. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about display devices. How to, differentiating between the various types that we work on from time to time, what makes each of these unique, kind of the evolution of them. And we're going to be able to describe the different types of displays, characteristics of those displays, the purpose of projectors. We're going to be getting into some of the different settings on the monitors and how to adapt them, identify video ports and connectors. I know you guys got through this morning's cables and connectors and are like, man, this is awesome. Is there any more you could teach us about cables and connectors? And we're here to deliver. We've got more slides on cables and connectors for y'all. And I think you're really gonna like it. So we're gonna move through these as well. We're also gonna talk about some common problems that come up with monitors and the types of ways we can repair or mitigate these issues.
Kelly, you shouldn't have.
I shouldn't have. I'm a giver. I just, I love trying to bring more to the table for everyone. So for this particular technical session, the BSMs we're going to be keeping in mind, teamwork. IT is not a solo sport. We often work in teams, and as such, we're going to have different skill sets, different things we excel at, and things that we may struggle with from time to time. So we need to be able to work and communicate well with others on our team so that we can be the most efficient and effective possible for our organization. Also, personal responsibility. Simply put, if you say you're going to do something, you follow through and you do that thing. If you make a mistake, own that mistake, because you can quickly hedge off many issues if you own your mistake out of the gate. More often than not, what aggravates employers is your failure to take responsibility for your actions. Now, that's the negative side of it, but the positive side is you also need to take responsibility for the good things you do. You are your best advocate. And in the when you get in with a company, or if you're applying for positions, you need to be your best cheerleader. You need to be the one singing your praises. So that's the other side of personal responsibility. It's very seldom talked about, but we try to project that here as well. So, stepping into display devices and sitting here going, gosh, I just want to learn more about this stuff. How has this stuff evolved? Where do we begin? So essentially, your monitor is your primary output device for most computing devices, and that can take several different forms. It shows what is going on with the programs and the operating systems. It makes it much easier for us to interact with our computer and the various other peripherals because it gives us a instant visual feedback. We are very much visual creatures. So it gives us that instant feedback and allows for much better interaction. The video card or display adapter handles all of the communication between the CPU and the monitor itself. And we're going to be diving into different types of displays that use different types of technologies. The most common are CRT, LCD, LED, plasma, OLED, and projector. Some new ones that are starting to rear in right now, VR is becoming a really big one and is allowing us new levels of immersion and interaction with programs. Right now, it's mostly in the entertainment phase where it's games and stuff like that, but they're actually starting to develop some really interesting productivity apps for virtual meetings, being able to work in spaces together, brainstorming, mind mapping, all this kind of fun stuff. but we will kind of talk about this stuff a little bit later as well. Starting off in some of the older technologies, we have the CRT monitor, which is also called a cathode ray tube. You might have remembered these from your childhood in the house. You know, they generally weigh about 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. They take up, you know,
the fat bag.
Yeah, they take a whole, you know, like you used to have special tables that could bear the weight of these TVs. They were so big, you know. So older monitors, and it was so bad that like on Craigslist they'd be like, you know, free TV, it's 40-inch, and then at the bottom they would put a note, I will not help you move it, because it was just so heavy. People wanted it out of their house. You know, they were just like, I don't care, you can come pick it up for free, I'm just not going to help you lift it. So these are still around from time to time because they are very durable. So yeah, you know, you will see these on occasion in the wild, especially in places like warehouses, schools, although a lot of schools are starting to update to flat screens. My wife's school still has a whole bunch of CRTs around. They use a grid of red, green, and blue phosphorus to create the images on the screen themselves. They do have a lot of hazardous chemicals inside them, so we do not mess with them if they are broken. If you have a broken CRT monitor, that is a hazmat cleanup. There are special phone lines you have to call to come and take care of this, because there's mercury, all kinds of nasty stuff inside there. Also, much like a power supply, these have capacitors in them that are extremely dangerous. So we never work on a CRT monitor. We never open it up. If it's broke, it goes to the recycling center. If the glass itself or the actual screen is busted, the hazmat has to come clean it up. That's not something we mess with. But if it's still intact, it can go to a recycling center and they can extract those materials out of it safely and still be okay. Moving on. When we started to get into the flat screen world, first step into that would be the LCD, or liquid crystal display monitor. So it's comprised of a bunch of tiny little liquid crystal molecules called subpixels. And they're arranged essentially in rows and columns, and they sit between polarized filters. Each group has 3 pixels associated with it, a red, a green, and a blue. And depending on the level to which they light up, that's how we get the various colors on our screen. However, these screens do not generate light. We have to light them up from behind. So we use a backlight in order to allow the image to shine through that particular screen. LCD monitors use a thin film transistor to control the color of each dot itself. And that provides with pretty quick picture display, relatively crisp definition, and then tight color control. You usually run into the issues with the light to dark colors. If you've ever noticed that, like if you're in a dark scene and then someone's face is lit, it kind of bleeds out gray into the black parts of the screen. That's partially due to the backlighting, how that operates. But there are 2 specific types of LCDs that we need to be aware of. You have IPS, which is in-plane switching, which shows much truer color images. You have a better viewing angle. I don't know if you guys remember the early days of flat screens, where if you sat like about 5 degrees off of center, part of the screen would be blacked out. IPS kind of fixes that. So there's a much wider viewing angle on the TV, and they are more expensive, but here's the rub. They have slower response times. So if you're watching things like sports and stuff like that, you get that blur when you have the panning images. So the image isn't crisp and clear as you have the panning. Contrast that with the twisted pneumatic, excuse me, which is preferred by gamers. Absolutely want to remember that. Twisted pneumatic preferred by gamers because of simply the faster response time. Yeah, the colors aren't as crisp. Yeah, it may not be as pretty. You have a tighter viewing angle because if you get off center a little bit, you know, part of the screen is going to be blacked out, but it responds very quickly. And so when you start getting into higher end gaming, that becomes critical because it allows for your response time. There was a fun story somebody was telling. This guy was starting up a Madden league, and then they were going to have a regional competition that led into the national one. They had a $10,000 prize for the first place winner of this, you know, regional competition. They set up, you know, they scrapped together as many monitors as they could. It was at a local bar. They set up about 15 or 20 gaming stations, and then they would assign people, you know, or they could wait in line to play. And what they noticed real quickly was several gaming stations nobody was playing at. And then there was like 8 or so that there were lines of people waiting to play these games. And what happened was the gamers quickly figured out which TVs had the twisted pneumatics and which one had the IPS. And so to have the best chance for winning, they went for the twisted pneumatic TVs, and they were willing to just wait in line rather than play on the IPS ones. So gamers will prefer the TN or twisted pneumatic screens. Questions so far? All right. So some of the components within the LCD monitor itself. Like we were saying, the LCD panel itself does not create light. It has to be lit from behind. Early LCD monitors were lit with what is essentially called a CCFL, or cold cathode fluorescent lamp. Fancy ways of saying, you know, the tube lights that you have at schools or offices or public buildings, you see those long tube lights up in the ceiling. That's what that is. This is a smaller version of that. So they essentially just put that fluorescent lamp there. Well, here's a problem. The CCFLs required alternating current to work. But we have a problem. When the power goes through the power supply, what does it do?
Does it shut it down?
No, the power supply doesn't shut it down. So when power goes through the power supply, what is one of the main functions the power supply serves?
Converts it to DC.
DC?
Correct. It converts AC from the outlet into DC. So now we have a problem. We have direct current going into the monitor. The CCFL lamps won't work off of direct current.
So you got to reconvert it?
We've got to reconvert it.
So it's an inverter in there?
That's where the inverter comes in. So CCFL backlights also have what is called an inverter. Oh. And that inverter takes DC and converts it back to AC.
Oh,
so that the CCFL can use. So that's some, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't realize I was unmuted.
No worries. Did you have a question, Gali?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, so I mean, I get the purpose of the inverter, you know, as I guess to like protect other stuff, but wouldn't it just like let instead of putting the inverter there and just let the AC current go straight into there, but only use a power supply for the DC for everything else besides besides
then you're gonna have to create multiple pathways in just to be able to do that, because every other component other than that bulb requires DC.
Okay, so it's easier putting the inverter just for that one, just to like do like the same thing twice, I guess.
Correct. So we're, you know, the inverter changes to AC so that CCFL bulbs can light. That's what they require. So they were able to put that component in there just for that, rather than running multiple rails from the power supply into the monitor and then have it split off to the various needs.
Okay.
Also allows us to use those same cables for multiple things. Like if you notice, like the IEC cables for your monitor, a lot of times are very similar to that little 3-prong cable. Also the same ones you can use on your towers. For many years that was the case, although more monitors are switching to more proprietary type connectors. But for many a year, it was the same. You could use the same cable for your tower as you could for your monitor.
And it's safer this way too than, you know, bringing 2 leads, or even, I understand what Gali's saying, like just take 2 of the leads off of the AC that after it hits the lamp.
Yes.
Grab 2 leads and then have that converted to DC in a transformer, and then power the rest of the components. I get that part, but you know, that's way dangerous then at that point.
Yeah. So this way, you're, you know, all that is happening internally in the monitor rather than externally through the power supply.
Yeah.
So next evolution of monitors after LCD, we get to LED, or light emitting diode. And basically the only difference between an LCD and LED is the type of backlight that it's using. LCD uses that CCFL bulb. LED uses a grid of LED lights, little light emitting diodes. This allowed them to reduce the thickness of the panels. So the panels were able to get a lot thinner, not having to have those fluorescent bulbs in there and just having a flat panel of LEDs. And it allowed to provide a better range and accuracy for the color. You don't have as much bleed over into, like, from the colors, you know, the bright colors into the dark colors, because you're able to contain it a little better with the LED matrix. The other nice thing is it receives DC power directly and does not require an inverter inside the monitor itself. So if it has an inverter, you should instantly know that it is a CCFL LCD monitor. If no inverter is present, then it would be an LED.
Say that one more time, Kelly.
So if an inverter is present on the monitor or the display device, you know it is a CCFL bulb that is powering the backlight. It's that fluorescent bulb is your backlight because the inverter switches it for the fluorescent bulb. If no inverter is present, then you're looking at a LED monitor, because LEDs just use direct current. Like all the other components, no inverter is required. So it allows it to be lighter and thinner. And as a positive thing, also requires less mercury, because those CCFL bulbs have mercury in them. So it's a little bit kinder to the environment when the LCDs are disposed of and or recycled.
And that difference is very important. There's a lot of questions about that on the exams.
Okay. I would listen to her. She took the exam a lot more recently than I did. All right. Next. So what are the pluses and minuses going with an LCD versus an LED? LCD, heavier and thicker. LED, thinner and lighter. Nice, right? Bonus for the LCD, it's cheaper. LED, more expensive. Brightness, much lower on the CCFL, higher on the LED. The lifespan, especially for the backlight, is significantly shorter on the CCFL than on the LED. And finally, power consumption. You have significantly higher power requirements for the CCFL bulb versus the LED matrix. Enough about those. What about plasma? Plasma essentially uses small cells containing iodized gases, similar to what is used in fluorescent lamps. The nice thing about the plasma was they had that really high quality, crisp picture. Much wider viewing angles than the early editions of the LED monitors, and significantly less motion blur. Problems were screen burn-in, much easier on a plasma. If you were watching, say, ESPN forever, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, where they have that little logo down at the bottom, and then you change the channel, and that logo just stays there. So if you watch any channel, they have that little fun logo on the side. Eventually, it burns in on plasmas. It's less likely on LCDs and LEDs, but it does happen. But plasmas, it was very likely to happen. Even now, if you pay attention, those little logos actually move. Like they kind of move around in circles now. It's very slowly, so it actually prevents that burn-in. So if you watch the same channel for any length of time, you'll notice that. Typically, they were used for TV displays, but now are mostly used for display monitors that accept outputs from a variety of devices, also including personal computers. But though we still may run into in the wild, that are typically no longer being made for consumers. The other issue I think I had on these, if I remember correctly, was even though they had that crisper picture and all that stuff, they were lower light. So you couldn't really watch them in bright rooms. If I remember that correctly with the plasmas.
I guess that's what makes it good for monitors.
Like home theaters and monitors and stuff like that. Something you're not going to be watching in very bright rooms. And finally, we reach essentially the pinnacle of where we are at now, which is the OLEDs, or organic light emitting diode monitors. These things are awesome. It is the LED panel in the LCD screen. It creates its own light. So no backlight is required. So the organic layer of it resides between two electrodes, and you can light up individual pixels, which allows for extremely crisp pictures. Very high contrast ratio. So, you know, brighter brights, darker darks, not much bleed over in that color. Unfortunately, the technology is still very expensive. And it has a rather unfortunate limited lifespan. But it is allowing for the adaptation of newer technologies. For instance, the ability to bend monitors to the point where we are essentially on the verge of folding phones. Some technology conventions, they've shown like essentially just fully flexible displays. You can wrap them around your arm. You know, they've had OLED clothing that you could actually have different displays showing up on your clothing. They've done all kinds of really neat stuff with this newer technology. Amazing stuff, lots of really great technological advances happening around it. Unfortunately, though, it's still very expensive when compared to the other options we have. So, but over time, that price point comes down. It becomes much more attainable for everybody else. And then the market starts to reach maturity and expand much faster. Questions so far?
I was wondering what made it organic.
The I guess that they're using a bioluminescence microbes, and when those microbes are hit with an electrical current, they light up, and that's what the organic part comes in.
Yeah, okay.
Diego likes to say we're torturing organisms for our entertainment, but you know, I don't know.
Isn't this all converted stuff though? Because, you know, nothing is really, you know.
It's all in how you look at it.
Yeah.
I know, you know, I didn't name it. I just work with the information that I have. On to, now that we've gotten away from physical monitors themselves, we can move on to projectors. So projectors enable display computer images to an audience in two possible ways. They're throwing that image from a device to a screen for everybody to view. So we can either view it in two ways. We can either have what is called a front view, which is the most common, where you have that projector kind of sitting in the middle of the room and it's projecting against the screen up on the wall and everybody sees it and it's kind of cool. The other way they can do it is they have what's called a rear image, and the projector is actually throwing the image from behind the screen and you're seeing the reflection of it from the front. So it's inverting that image and throwing it up on the screen, and you see it from the back and you don't have a projector in the room with you. It's behind your actual physical screen. Brightness of a projector is measured in what is called lumens, and that is the amount of light given off by a particular light source from a certain angle that is perceived by the human eye. Higher the lumens, the brighter the projector. Trivia question I always like to ask at this point is, who can tell me what a single lumen is? What is a single lumen? Where do we get this measurement from? I'll give you a hint. It's very old. Like when you get a flashlight and it says 800 lumens. What's a lumen? Ella's close. It's not torchlight, but you're right there. You're knocking on the right door.
Is it a lantern?
Also close, not a lantern. It's not sunlight.
Is it flashlight, something?
Well, flashlights are measured in lumens. Like I said, you can get a flashlight, it's like 800 lumens. So torchlight's close, lanterns are close. Something a little more consistent, because a torch can burn brighter and dimmer as it gets, you know, burning out. Not natural light.
Fire.
Is it like a light bulb?
Before light bulbs.
That's a candle.
Candle.
Oh.
A lumen is the light given off by a single candle.
I said we can't go more far back than candles, I guess.
Yeah. So we measure the light of projectors, of flashlights, and all these things by lumens, and a lumen is the light of a single candle. So when you're turning on a flashlight, it's 800 lumens. It's saying it's got 800 candle power. You know, like it's, you know, like we measure cars in horsepower.
I was just gonna say the same thing. I said, is it the same thing with the horse and horsepower?
Yeah. So it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing. So it's measured in lumens. And then the other measurement they use is called throw, which is the size of the image at a certain distance from the screen. So all projectors have a recommended minimum and maximum throw. So like there's a recommended minimum or maximum distance from the screen that the projector needs to be. If you're too close, it'll be blurry. If you're too far, it'll be blurry because the image will be dispersed a little too much. So the throw, they'll say, you know, this projector is good from 15 to 25 feet or something along those lines. That's your minimum and maximum throw. Inside of your projector, the light is generated by lamps. They generate quite a bit of heat. I don't know if you've ever worked with projectors. They get really hot really quickly. And so all projectors have fans to kind of keep them from overheating and burning out, because unfortunately, the lamps inside these projectors are really expensive. close to 20 years ago, the one we had in our office, if the bulb went out, it was $500 for one bulb. And that's 20 years ago. So now I don't even want to ask how much they cost. So bulbs themselves can be very expensive within the projectors. So we want to make sure we take care of those. We don't leave projectors on unnecessarily long. We make sure those fans are running so that we can keep those things cool so they do not burn out. That is our main, one of the main things we will be listening for and looking for when we're utilizing projectors. All right. Now, talking about other monitor settings, getting away from projectors back to regular monitors. So brightness on a monitor, and that is determined by your monitor's backlight. And this is measured in nits. Unfortunately, for those of you who like the history lessons, I don't really know the history of the word nit. If you want to look it up, let us know. I'll add it to my trivia bank, but I don't know this one off the top of my head. So displays vary from roughly 100 nits all the way up to 1,000 nits for the more high-end ones, which can create extremely bright screens. Now, the next three always get mixed up. So the next three things we want to talk about, we always get mixed up, and that is response rate, refresh rate, and contrast ratio.
Do we need to know the test?
Yes. For the A+, yes. Contrast ratio is simply the difference between the darkest darks and the lightest lights. So that's your contrast ratio. What is the biggest color contrast you can get on a screen at any given time? Particularly good one, as they put here, is 450 to 1. These two I always flipped, the other two, response rate and refresh rate. Response rate is essentially the amount of time it takes for a single subpixel on the panel to go from pure black to pure white and back to pure black again. And this is measured in milliseconds. And then refresh rate, which we tend to be a little more familiar with, that is how often the screen can fully update the image that is on there. So it's essentially rapidly throwing still images up there, but because of the speed that they're putting them up, our brains register that as movement. I think the brain registers anything above 32 frames per second as movement. If you look at old black and white videos, why they look so choppy is they're roughly at about 29 images per second, which is why it seems like the images are jumpy. Modern ones, you're looking at roughly about 60 hertz is fine. That's what we would normally view at. Gamers tend to say, I don't like anything below 120, usually around 60 to 90. If you're watching, like fast action, like in sports or action movies or something like that, you will get some kind of blur. 120, you don't notice the blur. Questions so far on this? Brightness and contrast ratio kind of stick out as, like, I get it right off the bat. It's the refresh and response that always get me. So that's the two that always stuck with me. All right, monitor settings. So a monitor's resolution is determined by the number of horizontal and vertical pixels that you have. And most monitors allow for 2 or more resolutions that you can pick from. And based on how you're going to use it, it gives you the best picture possible. Here is a fun list of the resolutions, going all the way back to the analog VGA, all the way up to the UHD 4K. You're asking yourself, do I need to memorize these? No, you don't, but you do need to kind of have an idea as to the evolution. The big ones I would pay attention to would obviously be your HD TV. Your first true HD TV was about, first one was at 720. That was the early HD. Later versions where it became true HD was the 1080, which is the more common you hear. And then 4K, we got up to 3840. Those are the main ones I would remember. And it's just the basic pixel count of the 720, 1080, and then the 3840. The rest of them, again, it's mostly for understanding the evolution of these display technologies. How would you know when you see one what? How would we know what we were looking at in the monitor? Basically, you would go into the settings of the monitor and it would tell you what it was, or it would come with the display information you had. Good question, though. I like that. All right. Some other monitor settings we do need to be aware of. One is the aspect ratio, which is the ratio between your horizontal and your vertical. If you, I will get you. Yeah, go ahead, Gali.
Sorry. Yeah, it was about the previous slide with the monitor and the with the resolution. So sometimes like I noticed that like they would like say the resolution but give you the option to pick different ones. Yes. So you can like, is it always better to run like on a like, I guess it would be like lower resolution mean worse, or like how does that work? Because
we'll get to that. That is coming up right in the next slide.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So we'll
no worries. I like the question. You're thinking ahead. All right. So monitor settings, aspect ratio. Aspect ratio essentially is the ratio between your horizontal and your vertical. If you remember, older TVs tended to be more squarish. And then as they've evolved over time, they're becoming more and more rectangular and stretched out. If you've ever noticed watching older movies, one of two things happen. Either the people seem really, really stretched out or kind of wide, or you have like the black bars on either side where they're kind of, you know, cutting the screen a little bit to, you know, make the ratio fit. Or the other way, if you're watching on a thinner monitor and the resolution is set for something wider, the people look really, really squished and stretched out. Those are like the two different ways you would see it from time to time. And they used to have that warning before each movie is, you know, warning, this movie has been formatted to fit your TV. That almost had everything to do with your aspect ratio, where they would cut off pieces from either side of the actual movie and make it so that it would actually be a box shape for your TV. With regards to aspect ratio, the most common ones are your 4.3, 16 by 9, and 16 by 10. 16 by 9 being pretty much the most common at this point. Now, getting to Gali's question. All LCD monitors have what is called a native resolution. And that enables the display the sharpest picture possible. So the best image that you can receive on your picture or on your monitor is going to be its native resolution. So when you're selecting that, it will tell you this is its native resolution. Typically, you can go lower than that if you wish. I can't really think of many reasons why you would do that, but you can. But you can't make it go much higher. You know, you can't make it perform better than it's meant to. So like, you know, CPUs, we can overclock a CPU. You can't really do the same thing for a monitor. So your best monitor resolution settings are going to be the native setting, native resolution.
So why would they like kind of put like you can make it go lower? There's no need to. Wouldn't it just be like better if you just leave it at the resolution that it can like be at?
Well, say you, I mean, one way I can think of it is like if you have a much lower grade input, like something that's going to have a much lower, like if you're doing like a Nintendo emulator or something like that, it's going to have like 18-bit graphics. If you, in order for it to fit, it would be this tiny little box and you'd barely be able to see it as the guy's jumping around. So you can lower the resolution so that it expands the picture and makes it so that it's a little clearer for you to view. So depending on your input, you may lower the resolution to match the input you're receiving.
Got it.
Another one, a super easy one to see is whenever you get like a brand new monitor and you have an old computer, you have the HDMI, or you have like a bunch of inputs in the back, and you use the VGA, right? The least of them all. You're not utilizing the native graphics of the monitor. You're utilizing the basic that the computer is pushing.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, Greg, as well. All right. Another monitor setting that many of you may be familiar with is multiple displays. Nowadays, almost all PCs allow the use of multiple monitors as long as there is a display card that can handle it. Now, there's two different ways that you can display on multiple monitors. You have what is called mirroring, which means the exact same image will be played on each screen. Works great for presentations, things like that. It's called mirroring. So you're mirroring from one image on one screen to the same image on another screen. So it's a mirrored desktop. The other way, where you can have multiple monitors operating as the same desktop, you're just kind of expanding your real estate, so to speak, that you can work with. That is called an extended desktop. You're extending your reach into other monitors. So if, you can take your whatever windows you're working on here and push them over to another monitor and work on them over there. And it kind of gives you more real estate, so to speak, to work on. That is called an extended desktop versus a mirror desktop, which is the same image on both screens. How many people here have worked on machines with multiple displays? Ella, Joyce, there we go. Bernard. Okay. So quite a few. Danielle, I'm fairly certain Greg has.
I have a question. I haven't worked on it before. Does it matter the type of computer you have? Like there they have a laptop. So that's possible. You can have a laptop, as many monitors as you want?
Not as many as you want, but likely you can get 2 to 3.
Okay.
Because what you have on the back of your laptop, you should have like a display port or something like that. Or you can use what is called a port replicator. And you can actually hook up to multiple monitors. So you can use your laptop monitor and have another monitor next to it and then operate on those. In my old office, I operated off of a particular laptop that allowed me to have 3 monitors. And that was awesome. Being able to have that much real estate to push things around saved me a whole lot of clicking around. But yeah, just with a standard laptop, if it's been made within the last 15 years, likely you can hook up to multiple monitors.
Back in the day, before you had the capability of a home PC having 3 or 4 monitors, you used to just have the dual screens, right? They have software out there that you can actually mirror, so you can basically unify all these computers into one space. They're all slaves to this one computer. And you push the graphics around and you can get up to like 8, 12, just as many as you want. You just keep pushing it across. Yeah. There's one that I use on my computer right now that I actually use to manage the other machines in my office. It's pretty cool. It's called, I think it's called Ideal. I got to double check and see what this one's called. But yeah, try them all.
Drop the link in Slack if any figure that out. That's kind of cool. I'd like to check that out. We have one of our like the TAs I started with. He has a 6 monitor rig. He has 3 up top, 3 on the bottom, and he has them set up so like he moves the stuff up, down, all the like all over. But he's,
Yeah, I have a 6 as well, but I only use 4 right now. Well, one of them is a TV, so I just have that in use. But yeah,
that's what you're doing during class. I got it.
No. It's off right now.
No worries, no worries.
So the multi-display is when you have like the two screen like next to each other, like you can like scroll between them and stuff.
Yes, depending on the setting you use. If you use mirrored, remember they look exactly the same if you use mirrored. So what you have on one screen automatically shows on the other. And then you have extended, which now they both operate kind of like the same display. And if I move something from one and just kind of move it to the side, it moves over to the other monitor. So I can see it over there. That's kind of how I operate here, which is why often you see me staring off to the side over here, is because I'm looking at my other monitor setup versus straight ahead.
So for the mirror, like in which occasion would you use that, like to have the same screen on both monitor? Like why would you need to do that?
Giving presentations. So you could have what's your display on your screen, but you could have the other display being a projector that's projecting on the wall behind you. So you wouldn't have to necessarily turn around and look at that screen. You could look at your screen and point on your screen without having to turn around and look at that one. So presentations are the biggest reason you would use the mirrored.
Okay.
I was talking to Danielle about the same thing because I feel like I would go to the test and fail because I'm so used to all these monitors. It makes my life so much easier when I can just grab a screenshot, drop it here, drop it there, and just look at them, side by side and do the work in the middle. But
the test is on one screen.
Yeah, one screen. I don't know if I could do it. I just don't know if I could do it. Seriously.
I would say practice.
Yeah.
You got to practice it. So you don't get, it's like, it's kind of like a culture shock. You don't get that culture shock when you go in and you only got the one screen to work with.
That was definitely me when I first bought my first touch screen laptop. So now when I go to everybody's house, I'm like trying to touch their screen, but it's like, oh wait, that's only my laptop does that. Like
smearing other people's machines.
My kid tries that with a TV. Like he's climbing up on the entertainment center and just like, bang, bang, I want to watch Netflix, bang, and it's just like, it's not working because he's just,
it's not a cell phone.
Yeah. There was a funny one where a guy was like doing that to like his mother-in-law. Like she went up and she was trying to like scroll through. He's like, it's a touchscreen. She goes up, she's trying to scroll through the different shows, and he's like spinning it on the remote for her. He goes, there you go, it's working. And she finally gets one. And he's like, the funny parts is going to be when I leave. So, but yeah. If you get used to certain types of technologies, when you use other systems, it can be kind of a switch. The touchscreen on desktops is kind of weird because it seems like it would take more effort to reach up and touch versus just moving your mouse. So I don't know. All right.
Kelly.
Yes.
Kelly. Yeah, just like you have VMware in your computer, you can have like as much as possible system on the one system when you have a VMware on your system. Just like that.
I'm sorry, wait, one more time.
I'm talking about when you have a VMware in your system, you can have like 10 system on a one particular system, like 15 up to 100 system on a one particular system.
Yes, depending on your system capabilities, yes, you can do that.
Okay.
But we'll be getting into that when we start talking about virtualization and stuff.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Other monitor settings. Finally, we have what are considered privacy filters. This is just more like additional hardware you can add to your monitor. You'll see this a lot in government offices. If you're dealing with highly sensitive information, a lot of times they will require a privacy filter. This is almost like the in-plane switching monitor, where if you're not directly in front of it, you move off just a slight bit, you can't see what's on that screen. Some of you may have put those kind of screens on your smartphones and stuff like that. I know they have some of those. So if like you're slightly off angle on that smartphone, you can't see what they're typing in or what is on their screen. It's kind of the same thing for a privacy filter. Anti-glare. I had this problem in my office where we had a bunch of windows to the back, and for some reason they had all the employees facing away from the windows. And in the springtime, when the sun was coming up, it was like directly behind you into your monitors, and you couldn't see anything on them. So anti-glare was kind of a requirement. But the privacy filters, it mostly depends on, you know, the type of information you're dealing with on a regular basis. Some people take it to extremes. I don't know if many of you have heard of Edward Snowden. He was the guy who released a lot of the NSA data. He was a cybersecurity guy for them. When he worked at the office, I kid you not, he had a blanket over his head and worked underneath the blanket while he was working on his laptop. He was that paranoid about people seeing his information. So he literally, yeah, well, I haven't seen the movie, but I just remember him talking about an interview. Like he literally worked, he had like a little, like almost like a sleeping bag that went over his computer monitor and his keyboard, so they couldn't see what he was typing and they couldn't see what he was working on. You know, he was very, very paranoid about shoulder surfing and things like that, even at the NSA.
But we should be, because people are so nosy. You never know who's reading your text messages, your emails, and who's standing behind you.
Well, that's when we get to cyber. When we get into security, we talk about that a lot. The biggest weakness in almost any company for cyber, for security, for, you know, intrusions into systems and all that stuff is people. People just letting it, you know, letting other people in. It's the trust factor. So, but we'll talk about that when we get into cybersecurity. All right. Next, we have a fun little quiz. Take about a minute.
Oh no, I was using the other pace one.
The student pace?
Yeah, student pace. Let me double. I gotta sign in. Sorry about that.
Oh, I gotta pause the recording too. So display modes review kind of goes through that same evolution like we looked at on the previous page. Again, the ones I would kind of pay attention to because of the evolution. Your HDs, even your early version of HD and your later version of HDs have 16:9. That is your more common one. SVGA, which is your old school squarish style TV, is 4.3. And then the Ultra HD, I don't think they have that on here. Oh, here it is. The 3840, which is 16:10. It's just slightly wider or taller. Now, for the moment we have all been waiting for. More cables and connectors. Just warms my heart to look out and see all these smiling faces, not just sitting there going like, we'll get there. So we got to get to the audio visual cables and connectors. Start with the oldest first, VGA, also called the DB15. We talked about this one this morning. So it has that kind of rhombus appearance. If you put it on its side, it almost looks like a D. And it's 15 because of the 15 pins throughout it. So yep, monitors still use this to this day. And early renditions that would do, like for laptops and stuff that would do, or desktops that would do multi-monitor settings, they would have one on VGA and one on DVI. So there's your DB15 VGA. This is an analog video port. So older technology. The next step up was DVI, or digital visual interface. This is when we were starting to convert from digital, or excuse me, from analog into digital. So this was a bridging technology. So you have the DVI-Ds, which is digital only. This is the later settings. This is how the pinout looks. If you look at the front of the connector, this is how it would look. All the pins for the dual link, and it has just the horizontal bar. And then the single link was missing the center section and these pinouts as well. Excuse me, yeah, this is DVI-D. So that actually would be the center one right here. Some reason they got this flipped. Then we have DVI-A, which has a whole bunch of pins missing. There is only single link, and this is analog only. So this is the first rendition of it. It has that horizontal bar with the 4 pins around it and then a bunch of pins missing. So this was analog only. This was the first of the new technology. Then we had the actual bridging technology, which was DVI interchange, which could be either digital or analog. And you have the difference between your single and double links here. Do you need to know this? Yes, but we have a Jamboard that will help you remember. So please don't think you have to memorize all this stuff first go around. This is your first exposure. This will come in time. The key takeaway for the DVI is it is a bridging technology. It is bridging that gap between analog and digital. And when we speak, if it's a D, it's digital only. If it's an A, analog, it's analog only. And we talk about the interchange. The key word here is or, not and. So basically means this cable can be used for either a digital link or an analog link. It cannot convert the signal. So it cannot take a digital signal and change it into an analog signal. So both ends need to be the same. So it's an or, digital or analog. So does that make sense?
Take a screenshot.
Yes, that's a good one to have a screenshot of.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that. All right, 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Next should be one that many of us are more familiar with. This would probably be more comfortable to us, is the HDMI connectors. If you've ever hooked up a TV, entertainment center, typically you would be utilizing this particular type of technology. The unique thing about the HDMI as it was coming on the scene is it allowed both digital and audio to be transmitted over the same line at the same time. Back in my day, we had to have cables in for everything. So we had a bunch of little ones we had to plug in on each end. HDMI fixed that. It was one cable, clip, clip, done. Walk away.
The red, yellow, and white ones, right? Yes.
And then there's, there were others in between there as well, which we'll get to in a few minutes. They were mostly designed at this point to be used for home theater. The one most people are familiar with is the 19-pin type A, which is this one right here. This is the standard HDMI. But they also have a smaller one, which is essentially the same thing in a smaller package, which is the also 19-pin HDMI type C, which is just a smaller form factor. Less common, more used for mobile devices and things like that. And this might be a light bulb moment for a few of you. This was for one of my students in particular. It was a pretty hilarious conversation. The maximum length of an HDMI cable depends upon the quality of the cable. All cables are not created equal. I had a lady in my first cohort. They had boxes of HDMI cables. And for some reason, they couldn't get full HDMI out of this high-end TV that they bought and this really nice entertainment center, all this stuff. And the picture always looked terrible. They could not figure out why. Her husband had repeatedly told her that the different price cables was just the tech industry trying to get more money out of you for basically the same product. And when she went to the store and started, understanding the acronyms and what everything that was being, learning in this class, she started looking at the cables and realizing there is a drastic difference in the types of cables and the ability for them to transmit picture, sound, and length of cable and all that fun stuff. So quality of cables matter. Next, we have the display port. Looks similar to the HDMI, but instead of having this little cutout on both sides, it only has it on one, and then it's flat on the other. It can transmit in digital, not analog, and also provide the audio data along with it. It uses similar packet transmission methods as we do for Ethernet. So you typically will see this on video cards and desktop computers at this point, though they are becoming significantly more common. There's smaller, the smaller mini display port, which is right here. It's commonly used in laptops, more commonly seen in Apple laptops. And the maximum length for a display port cable is 15 meters, which is pretty darn good. It's about 45 feet. For those of us that refuse to accept the metric system. I know it's better. All right. Next, the Thunderbolt. It is inevitable. You will get this confused with the lightning cable. I happen to believe this is intentional because it is also proprietary to Apple, just like the lightning cable. The Thunderbolt is an Apple proprietary, though other companies like the Windows machines and stuff are starting to adopt this technology to a degree. Originally set with Apple devices. And the key takeaway you really need to take with the Thunderbolt is it is the combining of two technologies in one. Whenever you see this, you need to immediately associate it with the combination of a PCI Express and a display port in the same technology. So both of those combine into one single signal. And then as an added bonus, it also provides power to the devices you're using.
Is that also the reason why I charge your phone so fast or your computer so fast? Because of the technology inside?
To a degree.
Oh.
Yes, I would say yes. That'd be a big part of it. It also can transmit video and data, much like a DisplayPort and a HDMI, as it has a DisplayPort technology that would be assumed at this point. Unfortunately, it is a much shorter cable. It has a maximum length of 3 meters, so only 9 feet maximum for a Thunderbolt cable. The other nice thing about it is the speed at which it can transfer data. You know, Thunderbolts 1 and 2 can get up to 20 gigabits per second, which is really fast. And then Thunderbolt 3 doubled even that. Now we get to 40 gigabits per second. At the time of this particular edition of CompTIA A+, it was predominantly used in MacBook Pro, MacBooks, and MacBook Air, typically.
Oh, let's not skip this one thing that I'm reading right now because I didn't read this last night. It uses the same connector as the mini DisplayPort. Did not know that.
Yes, on laptops.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, so yeah, it uses the mini display port, yes.
Hmm.
So this is a powerful one with a very fast throughput, which is why some Windows machines are starting to adopt the technology as well.
So is it truly proprietary, or because technically it's a mini display port?
It started out that way, and it was designed by Apple. So. We have to give them credit. They really aren't innovating much lately. Come on.
Okay. All right.
You know, I mean, mostly they're just making things look prettier. But
all
this
right.
was an actual innovation. Credit where it's due. All right. Other types of connectors we will look at. So we got some other ports here. We got these three, those old RGB ports. And why they would call them RGB is they mix the red, the green, and the blue into a single signal, which would go in this yellow port. And then the red and the white are your left and right audio links. And then we have our, I believe this is called S1 video right here. Did not see this very often, was not used for very long, was not extremely popular.
Oh, it was so popular in my house. Oh my God. Back in the day. What?
So I guess for like, you know, I guess some things like, you know.
Projector.
Okay.
And video games.
Video games? I never saw S-video in video games.
Yeah, it was, I can't remember which one it is on still.
Sega? Genesis?
Yeah, Sega.
Yeah, it's definitely Sega. Yeah, definitely Sega's. Yes. How did you? Oh, okay. Yeah.
I had Nintendo, so I was guessing it was the other one.
Oh, okay. I see.
Based on age, so that was a random guess. And then another one you may see here is a coaxial converter, which is like the old school cable where you had the thick wire with a little screw-on tip right here, and it would convert it into what looks like a headphone jack, but it was a coax converter. So again, another one you would not see very often. S-video and that one were rare. All right. Now, when HD technology and digital technology was really starting to bud, and they kind of wanted to bump it up from the old school VGA cables, they did these funky 5-cable connectors, which was called component video. So you had, instead of having just the yellow, where it was all in one, they separated out the red, the green, and the blue video. And then they had your red and white left and right audio. No, this never caused confusion where people would, flip the reds. Never happened. The other way that you may see this written instead of component video, and I would encourage you to remember this, is YPBR. So if you see it written out like that, that also means component video. When they mentioned component video on my A+, that was how it was written. I know it's a lot. We will get more exposure and more practice with this. This is your initial exposure to the information. So it is a lot. Okay, so here's that S video we were talking about earlier. Again, I didn't see it as very common, but I wasn't a Genesis person. Stands for Super Video. It's either a 4 or 7 pin round port. Looks similar to your PS2 port on the back of your computer. And older video cameras, stuff like that, would use this as well. Coaxial. Probably another one much like the HDMI we're extremely familiar with. This is how the cable comes into the house for the most part. When you see them hook it up, you have the long, whoop, too far. You have the long, thick cable, and it has this little piece that plugs in and then screws on so that it stays secure to your cable modem or what have you. So this is the more familiar ones that you may see. Now, there are two different types of connectors we need to be aware of with this. One, which would typically come into your house, which is like a old cable connection. Looks like this. You have that threaded screw on the tip of it and with the post sticking out. And this is called an F type. F is in Frank, F type connector. The other type, which you see off to the left here, you have these two different pieces here that would connect together. You have the round piece that would have notches cut out of it, and you have this other piece that has little nubs sticking out, like a little T. They will slide in together, twist, and lock. This is typically seen in networking scenarios, as many older networks, especially in office buildings and things like that, originally were coaxial cable. This was some of your earliest network transmission. And this type of connection is called a BNC, or bayonet Neil Councilman. You don't need to remember the bayonet Neil Councilman, just remember BNC. And this was typically how network connections were made a while back. Is it likely you will run into one of these in the wild, a BNC? Possible. Most networks don't use the coaxial anymore. It does come into some offices that way, much like your house, if other things are not available, like fiber or something like that.
You see them in old buildings for sure. Mm-hmm. They're alongside your, your plenum cables, but you see them right there, just abandoned.
Well, it wasn't cost effective to remove. It's kind of one of those things like they're not hurting anything. We'll just leave it there. Yeah. So, although with the price of copper, they might become valuable to pull them out. I don't know. We'll see. Might have some people going in like, hey man, I'll come in and pull that out for you for free. So BNC connector. All right. Next, I'm not going to go through all of these. Basically, what an adapter does is it changes the connection for you. So, if you want to go from, say, a VGA to a DVI, you're going from a digital VGA, or excuse me, an analog VGA to an analog DVI. An adapter allows you to bridge that connection. Like I was talking about earlier with the old trackball mouse I had. It had a PS2 connector. Most modern computers do not have that, but they have an adapter that converts it to a USB. Now, what adapters cannot do is change the signal that's coming through. All it's changing is the layout, the way the pins are aligned. That's all it's doing. If you need to change the signal type, you need a converter. So a converter changes the signal. An adapter just changes the shape of the pins that are coming through. Does that make sense? All right. On to video cards. We talked about this a lot before, so we won't need to get a whole lot in depth with it. They're essentially, the other term they use for them are graphics adapter cards or display cards. These are all basically terms used for the same thing. Most motherboards today have a port where you can install an additional one on there if you so choose. If you're going to do a lot of gaming or graphics rendering or things like that, it may be something you want to upgrade. For the average user who's just using it for, word processing, maybe surfing the internet, this may not be an upgrade that you'd want to do. Mostly what they do is they improve the output of the video port. And your video output could be your frames per second, the quality of the video, the resolution, all that stuff can be improved with the video card itself. On older computers, this can allow you to use more than one monitor at the same time. Newer computers already kind of have that technology built in. And they can connect either to your AGP, which is the accelerated graphics port, that little brown slot, or the PCIe slots on the motherboard. Obviously, your fastest is going to be your PCIe by 16. And the predominant manufacturers at the time, NVIDIA and ATI Radeon. This picture should look a little familiar. It just kind of breaks it down a little bit more. When we look at it, it looks like a mini motherboard, right? We have our main processing unit in the middle, which in this case would be our GPU. There's a cooling fan sitting just on top of it, much like we would on a motherboard to cool down that main processor. It has a heat sink, which can be identified. There's a tab here used to stabilize the card itself. And then you have options for outputs coming out. Just kind of, it's similar geography. The other thing you need to know about graphics cards, they come with their own RAM.
I had that same exact one. It's a Radeon. Yeah.
Now they're all like, they're in a case now, so you can't even see all the fun little pieces on it. But yeah, graphics cards come with their own RAM. So like if you're building a gaming computer, you don't necessarily need to add additional RAM if you're upgrading your graphics card, because your graphics card already has RAM built in. All right. We're almost done, I promise. It's only a few more slides to go. Okay. I see the excitement now. Where was it at the beginning? All right. Let's see here. Bernard, can you tell me what number 1 is, please?
That is a USB 2.0.
No. Gives you a little hint on the top of the connector.
I'm lost.
Lost?
Yeah. I'll take that.
Okay. Who do you want to call? Anybody want to help?
Display port.
DVR?
Display cable.
There we go. Display port, DP.
Display port.
Yeah, see that D and that P on the top? So D, like shapes it out right there. So it gives you a little bit of a clue on that one. Display port. Good try though, good try. Gamal, can you please tell me what number 3 or what number 2 is down here, bottom? Bottom left.
Thunderbolt.
So down here, number 2, the bottom left.
Oh, down. Hold on. Number 2, bottom of the left.
Yeah, Rahel getting really specific in chat.
VGA?
It's not a VGA.
Okay. I'm lost here.
Go. Rahel, what do you see there?
Is that a DVI?
That is a DVI. You were more specific in your oh, there's a Gali, yes. DVI, yes. But bonus points for Rahel on this one in chat. She got that it was a DVI D, specifically a DVI digital. So she picked up on it based on the pinout count. Excellent. So yes, this is the technology after the VGA. But good try, good try. See next, Tomas. Can you please tell me number 3, please?
Not gonna lie, this one was kind of scary.
I sensed that. That's why I called you. Remember I said we got to get comfortable getting things wrong because you know.
Yeah.
That's what helps us on our path to getting it right.
Whatever you say, man, you're going to be right on this one.
It looks like it's a part of something that converts, because it looked like one of the ones on the other screen.
Looks like a merger of technologies to me, you know?
Yeah.
I like that. This cunning way around that one. I like that.
It's like a merger of technology.
It looks like tech from the future.
Looks like something Apple might make.
Did I write it down? No, I didn't. I don't pay attention to Apple stuff because I know I'll never use one.
Thank you, Thomas.
You may have to fix one.
We're friends now.
Yeah, man.
Thunderbolt.
Yes. Who shouted that out?
Now, here is what I have to say about that.
Wonderful, Modena. That's awesome. Yes, that is the Thunderbolt. What are you saying here, Greg?
Okay, so this is something. This is why I have a problem with this one. It also looks like the mini display. It looks like the same mini display display port cable. The mini display.
Yes, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but just remember, you know, this can utilize the same. The Thunderbolt can utilize the mini display port, right?
The same
it's
form
the same
factor,
thing.
yes.
It's the same thing, man. Apple just wants to bogart some stuff.
Semantics. Nice work there. Good try. I like it. All right. Danielle, give me number 4, please.
Is that one a VGA?
That is a VGA. What is an alias for a VGA? What do we know it as well?
DB15.
D15. Beautiful. Excellent. Yuki, can you please tell me number 5, bonus points for the type of connector attached to it too?
Does it connect to the TV?
Can. Probably not with that connector, but yeah.
Is it a... I'm not sure.
Not sure. Gamal's got you in chat.
A coax?
Coaxial cable, yes. Is a typically when somebody says like they're running cable to their house, it is usually a coaxial cable. And Gamal correctly identified that as the BNC connector. So nice. Bayonet Neil Councilman. All right. Thank you, Yuki. Finally. Last one. Mohammed, can you please tell me number 6, sir? It's the bottom left, right here. Or bottom right. It's like this, not like this. If you're talking, you're on mute, sir.
Can
you hear me now?
I absolutely can hear you now.
Yeah, it looks like a USB Type-C. No?
Not a USB. It's got those little bump outs. It's not actually rectangular. I know it can be hard to see at that angle, but it's kind of, it goes like this, and then it bumps out like that. It comes in kind of like that. Wider than a USB. Might use it for your television.
It goes at the back of the TV, right?
Yeah. It's one used for it.
That looks like mini VGA.
Not a VGA. This one over here, this would be your VGA. So you're knocking on the right door. Cedric, can you help us out?
Adapters and converters.
It's a DVI converter. Yes?
No, you get some help. You get a lot of help in chat. If you want to check your chat, you get a lot of help in there. One of the more common home audio video cables you'll use.
Mini HDMI?
There you go, HDMI. There's nothing next to it to be able to confirm whether it's a mini or a standard, but it is an HDMI. Hard to tell when it's standalone.
It looks strange from that side.
Yeah, I know the angle of it is kind of funny. I agree with you. That's why I try to draw it out over here. So, and my artistic skills are sort of lacking. I apologize for that. But nice work. All right, gives us just a bit of a view on that. All right, next, we're going to troubleshoot some common monitor issues, some things you might come across on a daily basis. They do have better descriptions of this in your book when you get into troubleshooting monitors. You have things like ghosting, which is where you will see a secondary image on your screen. Almost looks like when instead of one person standing there, there's two. There's like ghost image of the person standing behind them. You have streaking, where you would have bars coming across the screen itself. Fuzzy vertical edges. Monitor not showing any red at all. Bad pixels. Pixels stuck on pure white. Flickering images, dim images, or a hissing noise. Has anybody ever had a hissing noise from their TV or a monitor? Usually doesn't end well. All right. So ghosting, streaking, or fuzzy images or fuzzy vertical edges, that's usually a connection issue. So you need to check your cables, make sure they're securely plugged in and seated properly, and or try switching the cables out, because most of the time that will fix it. If that doesn't fix it, you may have an issue with your video card. So for the ghosting, the streaking, and the fuzzy vertical edges, it's a connection issue most likely. So check your lines. Outside of restarting a computer, checking your cables and make sure that they're seated properly will fix a bunch of issues as well. And then also remember, cables have two sides. So don't just check one end, check the other end as well. All right. If you have one color is missing, again, you check for cable breaks, swap out your cables, see if that fixes your issue. Look for bent points on it. Sometimes, like if you're trying to run a cable between like a wall and a desk, that desk will bang into that cable a few times, damaging the fine copper threads in the wire, eventually causing you to have degraded images, if not, you know, maybe losing a particular color totally. Other thing, we have bad pixels. They give us two options. There's actually a third. The first one is check and see if the monitor is under warranty. If it is, send it off to the manufacturer. They'll refurbish it, send it back to you. The other one is change out the monitor. If it's not under warranty, buy a new monitor. Anybody want to guess what the third one is? Because I promise you there is a third option. And this holds true for dead pixels, which are dark pixels that never light up. Lit pixels, which are stuck on pure white, which they just stay white. They never change in any other color. And then there's a stuck pixel that will stay on a particular color, like a red, a blue, or a green.
I remember I had this problem and I fixed it with a like a flasher program.
If one gets stuck, you might be able to use that.
Yeah.
But if you have a bunch of dead pixels,
oh
yeah,
okay, yeah.
If you have an LCD monitor, you can send it in to be refurbished. If it's a you can have it changed out. If there isn't, what would be a third option for us?
Just use it like my computer. Just
there you go. That's the third option. Deal with it.
Okay. Simpler than I thought.
It's one of those things, like if it's not a ton of them, if it's only like 4 or 5 pixels and it's really not affecting your work, yeah, just deal with it. Places
I have
where
like a line going across my screen, a one little line, and then I have black spot on the sides, but I can see everything. So it's like,
there you go. I mean, as long as you can work around it, you know, why spend the money at this point if you don't need to? The only time, there's a few times where this doesn't work. If you work in the medical industry, like the TA that I started out with, Marvin, he is working on tech support for radiology departments. They can't hit one dead pixel on that monitor is trash. They get rid of it right away because you don't want to miss something on an x-ray because of a couple dead pixels. It's too important.
Or misdiagnose something.
Yes. So some place, you know, depending on your place of work, they may have a different tolerance for what they'll accept. If you're in a call center and you're just reading off of a script or something like that, you know, and it's not really a big deal, and there's a couple pixels out in the fringes of the screen, they're not going to care. They're just like, yeah, just deal with it. It's no big deal. You know, if it gets to be significantly worse, then we'll replace the monitor. So use as is or just deal with it. Flickering images. A couple of things that this might be is you might have, you know, an inexpensive panel with like a little too much light bleed, and the other one might be your CCFL backlight is dying. Have you ever been in like a school or an office or something like that and have that light just kind of flickering over your head? I always seem to be seated under one of those. I don't know why, but it just seemed to always be the case. I was under one of those bulbs and it just flicker and give you headaches, all that kind of fun stuff. So as the CCFLs die, they start to flicker. If it's flickering, it's not an LED issue. LEDs do not flicker. They're either on or off. That's it. They don't flicker. So if it happens to be a CCFL, you can replace the bulbs. The other would be a dim image, especially if it's like on the top half or the bottom half. It means part of your backlight. If you have like a gridded backlight where it's like it's broken up into like 4 or 6 or 8 panels or something like that. If one of those panels goes out, then it won't light the image properly. Then it means the backlight itself needs to be replaced. So if you get dark spots in just parts of the screen and it's continuing that part of the screen, it means you have a backlight issue. Now, if you hear that fun, distinct hissing sound coming from your monitor, it means your inverter is dying. But again, that is something that can be changed if needed. Depending on where you work, they may just say monitors are inexpensive. We'll just replace it. It's cheaper than you spending the hours trying to fix it. Or they may say, yeah, go ahead and give it a shot. You know, as long as you don't have calls coming in, go ahead and give it an attempt to fix the monitor or such. And we have a fun matching game for everyone as well. Good. We now have reached the end of our technical session. We should now be able to describe different types of displays and their respective characteristics. Describe the purpose of projectors. Hopefully we now know what a lumen is, and it will make more sense when we see flashlights. Describe different settings of monitors and how to adapt them. Identify the video ports and connectors that are utilized to connect the monitors, and identify common problems that come up with monitors. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, revelations? Did we learn far more about display devices today than we ever wanted to know in our lifetime?
Yes.
We sure did.
Yes. Most
we call that bonus content. So I'm glad, but at least I'm hoping you should be able to troubleshoot some of these issues going forward, at least understanding where they may be coming from, be it from the cables and connectors, maybe from your settings, various things like that. If your screen is spiderweb, then just a bunch of pretty colors, something violent happened. Not sure what yet, but various things like that. With that,
I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a suggestion of maybe when everyone looks at the self-pace, whenever there's like common problems or troubleshooting, it's good to take a snapshot of those. Sometimes I used to make my own folder for the T session, and where I thought there were important points or screenshots, I would put that in the folder. But the troubleshooting and the common problems will help you to think when you're being asked questions on the exam to deduce correctly, and in real life too, when you come across that.
Because when you hear certain terms or certain issues, it will point you to the area where those problems may be coming from.
Right.
So excellent tip, Rachel. Thank you. I was nowhere near as organized as you when I came through this class, I promise you. Yes, Kevin.
So two questions. One, I just reminded about the Coursera.
Okay. Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Let me see here. I will stop recording.